Zach. We are back and we are diving into moves to make in the middle of February here. And one of the things we are going to talk about today, not only moves to make, but some strategies to dive into, things we're focusing on at this point in the Dynasty offseason. And if you're enjoying the video, leave a like, comment down below what moves you're looking to make in this point of the offseason. What focuses are you having in terms of getting your Dynasty team in order? And if you need some help getting your team in order this offseason, check out our roster reviews and get in on the action there in the pinned comment below or the YouTube description box. And also, if you want 24/7 access to us and the rest of the Discord community, head on over to patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in on that 7-day free trial on me and Zach. But with all that said, all the promo in the books, let's get to the content you came for. Zach, I'm kicking it to you first. What is your Dynasty focus at this moment over the next couple weeks here? What are you looking to do right now in your Dynasty leagues?
Now that we have officially ended the NFL season, the Super Bowl is over. That means all players, their injury designations are over, right? I don't have the potential to buy a player and he gets hurt because he's not playing next week. That's over. Like, I was holding off on making any CMC offers the last few weeks because his team continued to win, which meant his team continued to play. That's over and done with. It is now veteran discount season, baby. Post Super Bowl to your rookie drafts are the best times to buy veteran players. However, you need a lot of information before doing this, Bob. So this can be a little bit of a gamble. You know my strategy from videos over the last few years. I'm not the biggest risk taker, but there is no possibility of playing any sort of fantasy football and not taking risks, not taking chances. You need to understand so much information. You have to look at players' current contracts, any potential outs the teams may have on those contracts, the team's overall cap situation, and how free agency and also the NFL draft might affect the player's status in terms of the expected future production. To help my team, and this is more so for competitive teams, that I need a few more pieces. I need a flex play. I need a little bit of depth here because, again, I'm not buying the big veterans. You know, I've never been really in on buying Devontae Adams for the last few years or Austin Eckler because I'm not that much of a gambler. But to help my teams on the more competitive side, Bob, this is a time of year to get players at tremendous values. Last year, I was really targeting Mike Evans and David Montgomery, and I was doing that prior to David Montgomery signing with the Lions. This year, I'm really looking at the likes of Jakobi Meyers, James Conner, to name a few. They're not expensive veteran buys. If anything, teams are looking to move off these players because they're a little bit older, so to say. But for the most part, I feel safe in their production for 2024. And that's really what I'm looking at when I'm buying a player like this. I'm looking at a 1 to 2 year snapshot of production and what I can pay to get that kind of guaranteed production. Because with players like Mike Evans and David Montgomery and Jakobi Meyers and James Conner, there is guaranteed production so long as they have a job. And that's where the risk really comes in. Could happen to James Conner, but his production this last few years has been outstanding and his contract hit is so minimal to a team that has a lot of cap flexibility in the Arizona Cardinals. So that's one reason why James Conner is on this list. I've bought a few of these players in different leagues. They're more complicated trades. They're not like, oh, here's a second round pick for Jakobi Meyers. They've been like, here's early second, give me Jakobi Meyers and an early third or whatever. But these are players that I think you can slot in your lineups. James Conner is a running back that, just in a 1 year snapshot, I feel really secure about having on my roster one way or the other, whether that's as a starting running back or that's as a depth and a flex fill-in running back. Jakobi Meyers was wide receiver 24 last year. I think his situation can only improve. How much worse can his quarterback play get? How much worse can the offense get to where he cannot outproduce wide receiver 24? And so I think for the cost associated with those two players and other players that are out there, you can make your own decisions on that. This to me is the time of the year to make these decisions. As we get past the rookie draft, these players get solidified in their roles. We get past free agency. We get past the draft. We get past the opportunities for them to lose production. It gets more expensive to buy these players. So that's why I'm doing it now. I'm doing a little bit of research. I'm having a little bit of faith and believing in my process in buying veteran players for the next 2 months, Bob.
I love the point here you touched on with, the production we're taking a gamble on, but the cost to get in on these players is so nice. James Conner is not costing anybody more than maybe a late second or an early third at this point. Jacoby Myers, maybe no more than a mid second, but probably less than that. And if you go higher than that, you can probably get a good piece back. So I love those two picks. One for me, and this is probably maybe above your price range, what you're really excited to go do. But somebody who I think is a value right now that kind of fits this NFL free agency uncertainty over the next couple months, Saquon Barkley is one of my favorite picks right now because he's still a very young player. I think he still has gas in the tank. I think he's been a victim of a terrible New York offense for the most part over the course of his entire career to this point, honestly. Was able to do well in a good season last year, in the first year under Brian Daboll with a healthy Daniel Jones all year. Obviously didn't have that this season. And I think he would have probably fared a little better, but now hopefully finding himself somewhere else on a new team. Right now, we're seeing trades pop off in our Discord, and this is why it's so important to be in a community because you get to see other trades that are happening in other leagues that much more frequently. We've seen Saquon Barkley go for an early second, and you get a 407 back on top of Saquon Barkley for that 203. Insanity. And we've seen him traded for a late first as well, which I think is a little bit more close to what his value should be. Very accessible player. That's just somebody that fits my thought process on this deal as well. Love the Connor pick. Fine with the Jacoby Myers pick as well. Moving on into my point here, my dynasty focus kind of ties into yours with one of mine. It's kind of multifaceted. I got two-ish points here, I guess you could say, but know what's next, know what's upcoming in your dynasty in terms of what's going on in the NFL right now. Next on the docket, next thing up, now the Super Bowl's out of the way, we got the NFL Combine coming up. That is going to be the igniter for rookie picks increasing to their peak value over the course of this draft process. So if you're still looking to trade up or trade into rookie drafts, this is the last chance you'll have before it gets that much more expensive. Being value-based players, you're going to have to pay exponentially more later. But if you're looking to trade down or out for existing players, might be a good time to wait, allow your picks to gain that much more value over time. But knowing what you're going to do or what you want to do with the picks you have or lack thereof can get you that much ahead of the curve right now. And then the next thing that actually kind of ties into what you were bringing up, and I kind of prefaced, I guess you could say, with Saquon Barkley, we got NFL free agency coming up. And now this can change a lot of players' values due to newer, better opportunities. Veterans like Mike Evans, who is a free agent, veterans like Saquon Barkley, who could find themselves in very appealing situations next season that help them rise in value. Right now, they're discounts because nobody knows what's going to happen to them. This could create new opportunities or better opportunities as well and create some value for some players that were entrenched behind these free agents that could be leaving their teams. We could flip these players or we could hold on to them for a hope in a rise in opportunities down the road. Some of these players, there will be a natural assumption that whatever's left behind after Mike Evans leaves, Trey Palmer, for example, is going to be somebody who ascends into a larger role. Not saying he isn't. This is just an example of a player in a situation that, is filling in a hole behind Mike Evans leaving, possibly. So if you don't believe in that player ascending, you could sell them at their new peak value, or you could hold on and see what happens through the draft or the rest of free agency. Who knows? But you should know the number one thing to know, or two of the things to know, is know what players are said to be free agents. Here's a nice long list for you: Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, Devin Singletary, Austin Eckler, Zach Moss, Derrick Henry, AJ Dillon, Antonio Gibson, Michael Pittman, Gabe Davis, Calvin Ridley, Mike Evans, Marquise Brown, T. Higgins. On top of that, know what players are quote unquote next man up, being Eric Ray, the running back in New York behind Saquon, Zamir White, running back behind Josh Jacobs, Tyjae Spears, running back behind Derrick Henry, Chris Rodriguez, running back alongside / behind Antonio Gibson, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Khalil Shakir, Trey Palmer, as mentioned, Michael Wilson, Andre Yoshevich, and Charlie Jones. Knowing these things, where some of these guys in some leagues, I know not everybody plays in a 40-man roster league where there's nothing on waivers like we sickos do. But I know there's not a lot of leagues out there that, have a ton of people out on the waiver. But I've seen these guys in some of my leagues out on waivers and guess what? They're not there anymore because I went and picked them up. So go check your waiver wire for guys that are those possible next men up that will be on the trending tab on Sleeper as soon as the other guys are signed. And then you put yourself in a position to possibly flip them, to hold on to them if you need the upside. If you're just, hunting picks, this is a good way you can get them. This is a good way you can also use these guys to possibly trade up your draft capital and kind of marry these 2 points together. But know what's coming up and know how that's going to impact your dynasty league. Zach, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this point.
Yeah, I love really the symbiotic relationship that we can take between the 2 points we've discussed, right? You just gave a whole list of players. They're not necessarily buy low veterans when you talk about the replacements like the Zamir Whites, the Tajay Spears, and so on and so forth. But you can make a calculated risk on those players and one that wouldn't burn you. Like Zamir White is somebody I've been very interested in because we got to see him at the end of the season and he was productive in his opportunity. But I'm just wary of buying him at what people are asking for right now, because if he doesn't get the job or they draft somebody else or they bring back Jacobs, like there's a lot of risk involved. So that's where some of the gambling decision-wise comes in, so to say. But I love this point because this is where being plugged in year-round really matters. This is where not disappearing from your league and just NFL offseason, time to take off. No, like this is the time of the year, Bob, to really understand what's happening with free agency, with contracts, with rookie drafts, with team situations. I'm going to talk about another one in just a second. But it's so important and vital to have this information over the next 3 to 4 months, because that's when you can make the difference to your team. Sure, you can make these moves in August, September, October, but it is double the cost later than doing the homework now and being able to get at a more affordable price. Dynasty Rewind tagline, we don't hate players, we hate values. This is a good time to get in on values because of knowing these offseason situations, knowing free agency, knowing the contract, knowing the next player to elevate into production given the opportunity. So I love this point, Bob, and I totally agree that this is how you stay locked into your leagues year round.
Yeah, it's the little things that set you apart. The work you do in the offseason, that's one way you're going to set yourself apart from your league mates. Zach, speaking of setting yourself apart from your league mates, how are you going to do it with your move to make this week? What do you got? I want to know, what are you doing here?
I am selling Pittsburgh Steelers pass catchers, and I'm buying Pittsburgh Steelers running backs.
Interesting.
Obviously, the Arthur Smith hire makes things very interesting there in Pittsburgh. But let's take a look at some of the statistics, right? Despite the Falcons not scoring particularly often, the rushing volume was absolutely there. In Arthur Smith's final 2 seasons in Atlanta, his team ranked 1st and 3rd in total rushing volume. Let's take it back now to Tennessee. If you include his 2 years in Tennessee and his years as the Atlanta head coach, Smith's offense has ranked 3rd, 2nd, one off year, 31st, 3rd, and 9th in total rushing yards. The Steelers, already a team that wants to establish the run. They led the league last year with a 52% neutral game script run rate. That takes out situations where there's a big variance in the score. Guess who was 2nd? The Falcons. It appears that they brought somebody in who already fits the mold of the type of game style that they like to play. Now, given how much the Steelers like to run the ball and all of Arthur Smith's offenses throughout his 5 years in charge of one, these guys that are pass catchers don't have a high ceiling in those offenses. And of course, we can just look at Atlanta. We could talk about Kyle Pitts and we could talk about Drake London. And then let's go back to Tennessee. A.J. Brown was never reached his ceiling in Tennessee because of the style of offense that was played there. So if you can get ahead of this, and I am including Pat Freiermuth in this, I don't think that this necessarily takes away from Pat Freiermuth's floor, but it definitely takes away from his ceiling. And I think when you talk about Pat Freiermuth, regardless of the injuries last year, he is well respected in the dynasty community at the tight end position as a safe option. I don't want that. I don't want any pass catchers in this offense. Unless you believe that, the Pittsburgh Steelers and Arthur Smith are going to change their philosophical approach to an offense, this is not a good situation to have Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, or Pat Freiermuth. And for that reason, I don't want those guys. I'm selling them, and I am buying Najee Harris, and I am buying Jaylen Warren, both of which averaged over 11 fantasy points per game last season. I am buying those players if the cost is reasonable. I am not buying them at a ceiling of an RB1. I'm buying them at maybe like RB 15 to 20 because they're going to cut into each other's workload. We saw what happened last year with Bijan Robinson, only 40% of the carries in that backfield. So I'd expect the same to happen in Pittsburgh. But if I can get a good deal on a running back, even for a year or two, and I can sell off these pass catchers that just, to me, their ceiling is extremely limited with Arthur Smith there, I'm making those moves as soon as I can, Bob.
Do you have a specific pick cost in mind for buying those running backs specifically?
As a matter of fact, I had 2 trades yesterday, not me, but 2 trades happen in one league with an owner bought or sold both running backs. I'm not sure which one. So yesterday, Najee Harris and Rico Dowdle were sold for David Montgomery. So it just depends on which side you want to have. Flavor. Yeah, and I think there you're kind of going for the better offense, right? With David Montgomery is what you're doing because the production is not all that dissimilar between David Montgomery and Najee Harris. The second trade, this is a really interesting one. Jaylen Warren was traded for Deontay Johnson.
Interesting.
Right?
So you'd be all about this one, right?
I would be about that one. Yes. Yeah. If I could get a running back that gives me 10 or 11 points, I think Jaylen Warren has 2 years left on his rookie contract. I would be about that in a heartbeat. I think that's a fantastic trade for whoever acquired Jaylen Warren there.
So do you think for Jaylen Warren, we could put like a mid to late second on him for his acquirer and maybe Najee like a super, super late first, early second?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't pay the Najee price because I think he's got 1 year left there. We don't know what happens. Sure. He's a player with a lot of wear and tear. It'd have to be the right deal. You know, would I move back from a late first to a late second or something like that? Sure. But I'm very wary about buying Najee Harris with a first round pick because of the long-term viability there. I would buy, I did put the caveat of if the price is right, and I'm glad that you specified that, what is the price? A late first is where I can get Jonathan Brooks there. I can get maybe a little bit later, Bucky Irving, or I could get Braylon Allen, depending on how he looks at the combine and his draft stock. So I like the Jaylen Warren trade there, but I don't know if I'd pay a late first for Najee Harris. And that might be what it takes, unfortunately.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I don't hate that. I really like the idea of going and getting Najee Harris as well. I think you are going to be in that, pick 11 to 14 to 15 range if you want to get him. And if you move a first, I think you can probably ask for Najee and then like a 25-second back. I think that's probably pretty reasonable for whatever that's worth to anybody. I think that would probably be my preferred option to go get, but I get not loving that price. But we have seen him too. Another trade that went down in our Discord, I think we touched on it in the last moves to make. We did. Najee went for like 203, and I'm like, all about it. Go get him for that price.
I agree.
More than happy.
Second round picks, I mean, they're hit or miss. We always look at draft picks with the ceiling and never the floor. And I think the beginning of the second round is where I'd be happy to pick up a Najee Harris. And I would like a pick back, a third, a fourth, whatever, just so I can get to 2 for 1 there. But I think that's where I start to really entertain that trade.
Another thing I love, another player I love, and I want to go get because I think the buy-in's good right now. I think he's a pretty accessible option. And my move to make for this week, buying low on Jaxon Smith-Njigba while I still can. We had a whole discussion about it in our Discord. I'm still all in on JSN just about. And the best part about being all in on JSN right now, doesn't cost that much to go all in on JSN. So the first thing we got to understand when we look at JSN last year and his production that he had or didn't have, lack thereof, however you want to say it, you have to understand that the deck was stacked against JSN more than most rookie wide receivers, especially when you go into the historical production side of things, where you want to try to put him in this box of like, well, maybe he's not what we wanted him to be, or maybe he's just not to the level we wanted him to be, whatever the case is. Still put together 63 receptions, 628 yards, 4 touchdowns on 90 targets. Not a bad day at the office. Obviously, if it was more like 180 some days at the office, but you get it. Take a look at what this offense for what it was. 230 passing yards per game that had to be spread over 2 other bona fide wide receiver veterans and other running backs and tight ends. 33 pass attempts per game to spread over 2 other bona fide vets at wide receiver and other running backs and tight ends per game. And then 1.4 passing touchdowns per game to spread over 2 other bona fide vets and other running backs and tight ends per game. Keeping in mind, coming into the season, had hand surgery in the very late part of the end of the preseason. He was expected to miss the first couple weeks, managed to get back on track and not miss any time in the regular season, but it's still likely that this stunted some of his development getting into the league and probably slowed him, especially early. And you saw after that bye week is what, which was week 5 for them. They had a very early bye week, started getting more and more involved in the offense as the season went on, and, struggled early, which between being a rookie and having a bum hand, possibly, this is all to say that JSN was not perfect either this season. And this is to say, the kind of the flip side of the argument here. Total of 8 drops on the season and only managed to bring in 3 of 12 contested catches. We don't love to see that. Going back to his Ohio State days, you got to go back to the prospect film sometimes and see, is this something that was normal for him? Did we see a lot of drops on his record? Did we see a trouble with contested catches? The answer is no. In 2021, his breakout season in college, he had 6 drops over his 112 targets, but his drop percentage was still significantly better than his first NFL season. And then you take a look at his college contested catch percentage. This was 71%, obviously better than the 25% it just was his first NFL season. And I know college production is not guaranteed to translate, but I expect his numbers to greatly improve in year 2 and beyond. On top of all this, we have a new offensive coordinator coming in Ryan Grubb, which is hopefully better than Shane Waldron. I don't know if anybody saw the extremely awkward Jaxon Smith-Njigba interview over Super Bowl week, where he couldn't say anything nice about the play caller other than he's a very nice guy. And, nothing about how good he could call plays or how good he is as an OC, but he's a very nice guy, though. So I appreciate him for at least, if he didn't have anything nice to say, he shut his trap. And then you look at before, all of these stats before, when you take a look at the, 230 passing yards per game, 33 pass attempts per game, 1.4 passing touchdowns per game, all of this middle of the row, all of this middle of the pack, which, this wouldn't be so bad if there wasn't so much target competition. Now, let's peel this back, going deeper a little bit. Despite having more season options around him, he still managed a close race when it comes to target share percentage per route run. So, and that equals how often a wide receiver is targeted when they're actually running a route. So this takes out all the fluff, all of the, distraction pass plays that they're just out there existing where, they're setting up for a block, whatever, who cares? When they're actually running a specific route, Jaxon Smith-Njigba was targeted 18.8% of the time. DK Metcalf was targeted 20.5% of the time. Tyler Lockett, 21% of the time. And as a disclaimer, none of these are elite numbers for wide receiver at all. This is very if you compare to somebody like Tyreek Hill was 35%. So it's a very big difference. But if you think about it, you're trying to split this offense evenly between 3 very good wide receivers. This is what happens. They didn't have that in Miami to split really with anybody. So it makes sense that he's more heavily targeted. Obviously, Jalen Waddle was there, but, was not nearly as impactful as he has been. But there's also the option on the table with Tyler Lockett. If they cut him post June 1 designation, they have 17 million reasons to do this because they save $17 million per overthecap.com. Just something to think about if he were to move on. And I don't think that's a guarantee, but I think if that does happen, this buy low window on JSN is gone. And if they improve quarterback, that's without assuming or even thinking that they improve quarterback. So all the things to think about here. And I don't think Jaxon Smith-Njigba is hard to acquire. We've seen a couple trades. I'll bring up one later, but we've seen a couple trades. Nick Chubb plus a first for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Michael Mayer plus a first for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I'm assuming these are somewhat later-ish first, probably outside of the top 7 or so. Just with the addition that they're getting on top, probably about equivalent to a second-round pick. So I'm assuming that they're at best probably, in the 108 range. So then pulling one from our Discord, we discussed a couple weeks back, 203 plus 209 for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And as I mentioned, there's one more from Discord that we'll discuss later. But what I realistically expect you to have to pay a first-round pick this year, 108 or later, and I think you may be able to get a future third back on top of JSN. But at the end of the day, the world is down on Jaxon Smith-Njigba. I'm not expecting a wide receiver 1 breakout by any means, but I could easily see a wide receiver 2-3 finish, which for his career's sake and value sake would put him on a nice trajectory to, hit his prime or start hitting his prime next year and really take off in terms of value and production when you need him to. And like I said, I'm buying now because if Lockett is cut, if they happen to add a quarterback in any shape or fashion, or if this offense improves to, last year Geno with Ryan Grubb coming in, and everybody I've talked to, everybody in our Discord is that are Washington Husky fans, which is where he's coming from. I know it says former Alabama OC, but he was the Alabama OC for 2 days, and then he's like, see ya, I'm going to Seattle to be OC up there. So the second any of these major improvements happen and catch on, Jason's value going up. I don't think anybody could deny it at that point. Zach, I'd love to hear your thoughts on buying in on JSN.
Well, funny enough, you mentioned it. I actually acquired my first Jaxon Smith-Njigba share.
Oh, I love that for you.
However, it was in a startup draft. And I'm gonna explain a couple things. First of all, people who are big fans of the channel are wondering, why the hell is Zach in another league? I didn't choose to be in this league. This league started. They had someone drop out.
Chose me,
and they reached out. I got 2 years for free in this league. Okay, because somebody dropped out in the middle of the startup draft. And this was right before rookies came into the sleeper ADP. So they were drafting kickers in place of rookie picks.
Sure.
I've never really done this before. This was actually really fun to do. I picked JSN in the 6th round of the startup draft, and the 108 rookie pick went right before I selected Jaxon Smith-Njigba. So that means somebody chose the 108 over Jaxon Smith-Njigba, which to me is insane. And what it tells me is, Bob, is that as a community, we did a poor job of managing expectations for JSN. We did this with Kendre Miller, and his ADP and rookie drafts was relative to those expectations, but we didn't do it with JSN because we were like, oh, goo goo gaga JSN. And he went 103, I think, in rookie drafts last year. He was
maybe a top 6 pick for sure.
It was more like 104, 105. Now that I'm remembering, like it was the 2 running backs, it was 1 or 2 of the quarterbacks, and then it was JSN. So we did a bad job of managing those expectations last year. Because I'm looking in the startup draft, Jordan Addison was picked before JSN, which I would never do that. All it is really like we should have understood the situation going in, and I thought we did. I thought we all knew, okay, he's playing behind DK Metcalf. He's playing behind Tyler Lockett. This is not going to be fruitful year one. If anything, I'm taking this now as an opportunity, Bob, to see who lands in this situation again this year in the rookie draft. So not to draft them and try to buy them a year from now. That's the lesson I've learned with JSN. Let me not buy the guy who doesn't land in a great landing spot year one, but should succeed in years 2, 3, and 4. And let me try and buy them in the middle of the season when they're not meeting expectations, or in the offseason when people just want to offload because their expectations weren't met. That's what I've taken from all this, Bob. And I finally got my first JSN share because the price was something I felt comfortable with there.
I love it, Zach. And I love that you got that for you. And I find it awesome that it, happen to line up right next to that 108 and make that point that much stronger. Getting into one of our newer segments now where we look at moves that have already been made that we pulled from our Discord, or that we've had our Discord, our patrons contribute to our completed trades tab, so we can kind of know what's going on out in the trade-averse, I guess you could say. And so we'll be going through these moves that have already been made and certifying if they are moves to make, or if they're possibly moves to avoid, or maybe how to fix the deals if we don't like them as much, and go through that. So the first one I got for you, Zach, in this deal, we moved the 206 for Jahan Dotson. How do you feel about this deal?
I like this deal. I like the Jahan Dotson side. I feel like a lot of the community is once again overreacting to a situation with not understanding the dynamics at play. We've talked about Sam Howell ad nauseum, how he didn't target his wide receivers. That's why they're picking at number 2 in the draft. And I fully expect Jahan Dotson to have a new signal caller throwing him the ball. So if I can get him for what is already a dart throw in the middle of the second round. I love this trade. And this is somebody that I was, a few weeks ago, I messaged you, Bob, like, I wish we talked about buying Jahan Dotson more, because it's one of these players that I have been looking to acquire in some of these deals. Not the veteran player that I talked about earlier, but definitely somebody I'm looking to buy low. And this is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think this is, for me, probably pretty fair in terms of value sake, at least right now. But I do think that this is buying in on a player who has a lot of upward trajectory ahead of them, with hopefully a quarterback upgrade coming in, hopefully a new system coming in that can help him thrive and be that much better. Those are two things that are going to help a lot. This new Washington team hopefully taking off, and hopefully Jahan Dotson is at the forefront of that. So I like this move a good bit as well. I could see both sides of this being happy with it too, for what it's worth. I don't think this is egregious either way. I think this is a good deal, certified mood to make all around. If you want to move to Jahan Dotson for the 206, I wouldn't fault anybody for that either. So let's get into our next one here. Moving DJ Moore plus the 205 to go get Garrett Wilson on your squad. Zach, what do you think of this one? Certified or not?
This is a tough one to parse through, really. This feels kind of even. Because I wouldn't mind either side of this deal. I think I lean a little bit more towards the DJ Moore and 205 side. I know that we're all expecting this crazy Garrett Wilson breakout, but until it happens, it hasn't. This is the same as Brandon Ayuk a couple years ago. We can keep doing this song and dance with Garrett Wilson every year, but until he's a top 5 wide receiver, if I can get top 5 compensation back in return, which maybe this is a little bit short of that, but I like both sides of this. I'd rather have the DJ Moore on the 205 side of this.
I lean again towards being pretty bang on fair, especially if you take into consideration is what each side is trying to do in the deal. Is one side trying to get to higher end assets because it's a shallower league? Is one team trying to get a little more competitive right now and secure a more competitive run with DJ Moore? Somebody who may not have the same longevity as Garrett Wilson, but who is producing rather well right now, but also keeping in mind that DJ Moore, first time being a wide receiver 1 in his career. Now, does that stick, or does he kind of, turn back into that pumpkin falling out of that top tier? Who knows? Does Garrett Wilson even get there next year? So a lot going on in here. I think you're kind of right on with this deal being kind of tough to parse through. And I think I probably, in essence, lean towards Garrett Wilson because I do believe in the overall talent and the overall eventual ascension. But, if you're somebody who's just trying to get points now and more secured points now, because I think if it's Justin Fields, if it's Caleb Williams, I think DJ Moore's points are relatively safe. So that's just something to think about with that. But moving on to this next one, I said I would bring up another JSN trade, and I wanted to save this one for now to get more JSN love in the books as well. Moving Brian Robinson plus the 204 for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Now, you are a big Brian Robinson guy. So how do you feel about this one? Is this certified or not?
I liked Brian Robinson at the price that you could get him at. Let's make sure we add that context there. I think, when you really, really get into the nitty-gritty here, Brian Robinson, I would say he's safe to get 200 fantasy points next year. He had 203 this year, and he missed 2 or 3 games or something like that. New offense coming in, Cliff Kingsbury at the helm. Not the biggest runner of the football, big passer of the football. How much is Brian Robinson a part of that? That's where this gets pretty tricky. I do lean towards the JSN side here. I do like Brian Robinson, but I like Brian Robinson because of the price that you could get him at. So if I can parlay that into now turning that into JSN, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I think this is an awesome trade if you are a team that is trying to move to a more secure position. And I think it's good for the other team too, because they can do a lot of things with that 204. With rookie drafts, you can add another running back maybe at 204. You can definitely add wide receiver, or you can maybe look to target the tight end room early. So I think, this is another one, good for both sides, good moves in the Discord happening so far today. And I think, again, right on fair value. I don't think I am unapologetically JSN biased forever, but so I lean that side. But I think at the end of the day, Brian Robinson's value, fringe of a late first, early second, then you get this relatively early second mixed in there as well. With what I've seen JSN go for, I don't think he's that far off from what these two values are combined. and you get that little bit more longevity with JSN. So maybe you're still buying a little low on JSN in terms of, the grander spectrum. But again, we know people hate JSN right now. So with that in mind, we'll move right along to number 4 here. Now, this one is interesting, and I have some thoughts, but I obviously want to hear from you first. Moving Jerome Ford plus the 201 for James Conner plus the 205. Your thoughts on this one?
Oh, I very easily lean towards the James Conner side on this.
Okay.
I think that we have to remember as a community that Jerome Ford is probably still the backup running back there. And even then wasn't uber efficient towards the end of the year. And, they started to go more pass heavy, and he was kind of phased out of that part of the offense. Now, yes, he can catch passes. That's not what I'm saying, but he's not a part of the passing game. So I would easily lean toward James Conner here. I'd much rather have the James Conner side, even if it's just for 1 year, as opposed to a backup handcuff running back. And it's almost the same tier, 201 to 205. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's not a huge difference. It's not 201 to 301. That's a big difference. So unless the person that is buying Jerome Ford is a Nick Chubb owner, I really like this for the James Conner side.
All right. Oddly enough, I was actually thinking that because I 100% prefer the James Conner side too. And I think that while you have that rather very realistic outlook for Jerome Ford, I don't think everybody does right now. If you look at DLF's ADP for the end of January, Jerome Ford coming off the board at running back 17 and James Conner running back 22.
Ooh. Wow.
So that would tell me that, honestly, in my opinion, I think these picks have an argument, not that they necessarily should, but an argument to be flipped, where James Conner should be getting the 201 and Jerome Ford should be getting the 205, or they should flip some other myriad of picks. Obviously, you can't just reassign picks for a trade, but that the Conner side should be going off of other resources. And this is one of the things I discuss in my trading guide, is going to third-party resource of any kind. And obviously you can kind of cherry pick, which is not great process. I don't suggest being, dishonest or, whatever, deceitful to your league mates, but just saying, hey, in the grand spectrum of things, Jerome Ford is more valued than James Conner. Why am I giving up the 201 to get the 205 back to get Conner back? Or you get what I'm saying, to get that pick flip done or that trade done. Just something to think about when you're kind of going through trades is, as much as I agree, I'd rather have Conner than Jerome Ford, the community, the world might not see it that way. And when you can kind of not manipulate, but when you can use these factual things to your advantage, you can gain the upper hand in trade. So I just think that would be my only thought, would be next time you have a running back and a running back side by side, see where they're going in the broad spectrum of things. And the reason why James Conner is going so late is because he's old. He's dead. He's off the cliff, even though he was great this last year. In all honesty, like you said, Jerome Ford, there's nothing tying him directly to a starting role next year outside of we'd like it. But in all honesty, James Conner has a much more higher likelihood, if you ask me. And when you're with running backs anyway, you may as well take the one, if you're trying to get running backs on your team or trying to upgrade, whatever the case is, I'd rather have the one that I believe is going to score more points next year. That's James Conner to me. So I think that would be my tweak with this trade, is to flip those picks around in some other way, send a third, get a second next year, something along those lines. But that'd be all I'd add to that one. And then just one fun one for the road. We saw a kind of a troll trade, a burner trade go down in one of our leagues, moving the, so I put this one as for meme purposes, moving to the 2025 fifth for good old Kadarius Toney, 2-time Super Bowl champion Kadarius Toney. And if you can get anything for Kadarius Toney, for me, it's absolutely certified. I've said that he's worth cutting. So anything you get for him, props to you. If you get anything better, by all means, do so. Anything to add on to that one, Zach?
I'll take the 2024, 2025, or 2026 fifth round pick.
literally anything to get Kadarius Toney off my roster for less or more than free, I guess you'd say. Even free is great as a win for me. But with that said, all the moves to make in the book, the certifying moves to make in the book. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like if you did. Comment down below what moves you're trying to make right now. We'll try to help you out in the comments as much as we can. If you want help with your roster and getting some moves made for your roster, check out the roster reviews in the YouTube description box or the pinned comment below. And also, if you want 24/7 access to us and the rest of the Dynasty community, check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind to get on our Patreon Discord server. Free 7-day trial on me and Zach, so check that out. It's been touted as the best Discord in the business, so that's all I can say. So get in there, check it out for a free 7 days, and let us know what you think of it. But with all that said, all the promo in the books, we'll see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.
No, this is where you get locked. My mic fell. Hang on.
Jesus.
I'm not
Got too heated.
And his ADP and did it again. That's what I've taken from this. And I finally got my first share.